Donahue, and the two of us split the city of Scranton and other parts of the Blackwater County. Here we're today here in Scranton. And at the Housing Jubilee, I like the naming of this. And certainly we are addressing today the crisis that faces so many here in the Commonwealth, but certainly here in Scranton with housing, affordability, and the access to affordable housing. I know many of you here in this room have statistics and outreach and advocate for housing for people that are in economic crisis, mental health. Mental health seems to be something that those that struggle with having affordable and safe places to stay. Sometimes it's mental health that's the biggest barrier. Even if you want to reach out and you do try to help, sometimes that's a whole parallel crisis that goes along with housing. So we're really grateful for this gathering. We're happy to be here today. In Harrisburg, certainly our colleagues that we work with, and we're getting off to a new session, and I think Kyle will agree with me, between now and June, we focus on the budget, Pennsylvania budget, because housing and affordability and access, it equals funding. You need funding, you need help, and that's what we have to do in Harrisburg with the Pennsylvania budget. February is here this month, and lots of the departments come before the Appropriations Committee, Department of Health, Transportation, Agriculture, Health and Human Services. Those secretaries come with their asks to the Appropriations Committee, and we get to ask them questions as well, but they come with their budget and say, this is what we need, this is what we're short, where are we short, and this is what we're asking you to advocate for us with the governor and his budget, their needs. So that's kind of where we are. Our colleagues in Harrisburg have, that seems to be some of their laser focuses. Each of us have different aspects that we focus on, different committees that we sit on, but we all know here in the Commonwealth that housing throughout the area is something that we need to address. So I'm grateful for this Jubilee. I'm grateful for the, I think is Amber our moderator today, and grateful for Rashida for putting this together. And I look forward to helping with solutions. So we're grateful to be here. So thank you very much. I don't know if any other things to add.
Quickly, Kyle Donahue, 113th District. Like Bridget said, we're getting into budget season. That's sort of what greases the skids on a lot of even legislation in terms of trade lists and that sort of stuff. So we're working hard to try to get housing in on the local government committee. It's trying to do a lot with zoning to allow for basically for housing, affordable housing to be put in commercial and industrial zones where it's appropriate, because it's not allowed under state law now to make that allowable. But it also, housing affects every part of our society, whether it's, especially our workforce. Drew Simpson from the partners here, I'm sure he could touch on that too, right? But you need affordable housing to have a good workforce and to be close to where those jobs are. So, please reach out to anybody with any questions you might have. We're here to serve all you. So thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We want to thank our state reps for coming and supporting our efforts. Affordable housing and housing crisis is an issue that has been coming down the pipe for a very long time. Unfortunately, we were not able to get ahead of the crisis as we should have, but now that we have this opportunity to do this work, we will. And so, again, I just want to give a round of our state reps who have supported us trying to get this affordable housing thing off the ground. So thank you very much. And also for the others who could not be here, everyone is doing the best they can. Again, These are uncertain times, folks. So just remember that. So we're going to do the best we can do. And now I'll have Amber Viola come up. She's our moderator. And if we could have our panelists come on over so that we could begin this discussion. So thank you. Thank you to our state reps.
Hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here. I would like to thank our state reps. My name is Amber Viola, and let me make this one taller. I will be your moderator. So first, let me get some housekeeping things out of the way. Here, there's some bathrooms that are located in the back when you go out the exit here to the left. The exits are located in case there's a fire, you'll know what to do. We have QR codes that are set up outside. I think there might be some on the different tables. So if you guys want an itinerary of the program, there's also a survey that you can fill out too. That would really help us throughout. I believe you can also ask a question in the survey too throughout the paper. So are you guys ready to get started today, this morning? Okay. Well, I would like to take this time to thank the University of Scranton for hosting this Housing Jubilee event. I would also like to thank our political leadership, federal, and all of our state partners. Today we gather not just to talk about housing, but to talk about and spark a movement that is rooted in justice, an opportunity, and in a fundamental belief that every person deserves a place to call home. We are here to introduce the Housing Jubilee, a bold and transformative initiative that reimagines what is possible when we come together with a purpose. To break the cycle of housing insecurity, eliminate crushing housing debt, and ensure that safe, affordable homes are right and not just a privilege. So what does Housing Jubilee mean? A jubilee, by its very definition, is a movement of renewal, a time to release restoration. Throughout history, jubilees have been represented new beginnings, where burdens are lifted, debts are forgiven, and people are given the chance to rebuild their lives with dignity. And that is exactly what this initiative is all about. And what exactly is this initiative all about? Well, the Housing Jubilee is commitment to action. It's a call to communities, policymakers, and advocates to unite around a shared goal, to remove the structural barriers and keep people trapped in housing instability. It's designed to eliminate burdensome housing debt that keeps families in financially desperate situations. No one should be forced to choose between having to pay rent and putting food on the table. Prevent displacement by ensuring that families and individuals are not forced out of their homes due to rising costs and unfair policies. Accelerate the development of affordable and sustainable housing so that safe, energy-efficient homes are accessible to everyone and not just to the wealthy and privileged. Reform outdated housing policies that favor corporate interest over working people, creating a system that truly serves the needs of our community. Empower communities by prioritizing local ownership, cooperative housing models, and initiative solutions that give people control over their housing futures. But let's be clear. The Housing Jubilee is not just an idea, it is a movement that requires all of us in this room, advocates, elected officials, organizers, everyday citizens, to take the wheel, measure steps toward housing justice. So I ask you guys this morning, are we ready to fight for a future where no one is left without a home? Are we ready to break the cycle and build something new? This is our movement. This is our Jubilee. Let us stand together, let us push forward, and make sure that housing justice is not just a dream, but also it becomes a reality. Let us stand together and make sure that it works for everybody, for our whole community. I would like to bring this point home by telling you guys a little bit more about myself and about my history. So some of you guys might know that I am a Navy veteran. I'm from NEPA, but I was raised in Gouldsboro. I came to Scranton after I got out the Navy. And for me, growing up, housing was something that I never really thought about. I grew up in a middle-class family. Most of the time I spent a lot of my time on base, in base housing. One thing about base housing is it offered you a lot of safety. It offered you a lot of security even as a child. My fondest memories are riding around on my bike, my brother chasing behind me because he couldn't ride a bike yet, and being able to go around, and there's MPs around on base and things like that, and it was safe. So, you know, our parents let us go out and hang out with people. When I got older, I came to the U after I left, and I went to the Navy and came back. I realized, oh, I gotta like find a place to live on my own. I have to figure this all out. I was lucky enough to be privileged enough to have somebody who rented apartments here. So I didn't have to look for an apartment. I had a hookup, I got an apartment, I moved in, was able to start school. But as I was going through the process of trying to move, I found out there's not a lot of protections for people here. My rent went up about $300 to $400 over a text message. My best friend's went up $300 over an email. We found out that wasn't illegal. Neither of us knew that you could just, up people's rent like that. There was nothing that we could do about it. We tried, we looked up everything, we were trying to figure out what was going on. And, people look at us and they say, hey, you're a veteran, you're using the VA, you look like you have your life together. But I was still in distress with housing because my rent takes up, until it's taken up like 80% of my veterans check. And a lot of people believe that veterans, they pay for our housing in a way where we don't have to pay for it. But no, we get money in and we take that money and pay our landlords. And there was other things added into that, trying to find a house, finding out that people didn't want to rent to me because I'm a disabled veteran. And people told me I didn't have a real job. And so they were worried about if I was going to be able to pay my rent. I was like, I think that's illegal. Not quite sure, but I don't think you can ask me that or say that. And I thought about all the other people that I worked with. I worked at CIC, Community Intervention Center, and saw the need for housing. And I'm like, if I can look like this and put this best face forward, how are other people trying to find a house who maybe don't have a best face forward to put? And how hard that was. And when Bridget mentioned mental health, that also is an issue, especially with us veterans who are dealing with PTSD. One of the reasons a lot of us are disabled and not working. So now you're saying that you're not gonna let us get an apartment because we have PTSD, we can't work, we're disabled. And there's just so many other barriers and issues to housing that I didn't know about. And the statistics for when your child is raised in an apartment versus a home, when your child is raised in a city versus a suburb, all those things are kind of detrimental to children. And it's such a privilege to grow up the way that I grew up and be able to have a safe environment. And living here, I want my child to have the same safe environment and having a safe place to call home. And having a place that you can afford and not just afford to stay in. Because how many of us pay our rent but then can't leave? Because all your bills are paid but you don't have any money to go anywhere else. And those are the things I realized. So I would really like to appreciate all the people who are here because I think that this is such a huge issue for me personally, and also for a lot of other people in our community. And it's about time we're standing here having these conversations and having real conversations and conversations where people aren't embarrassed to say, hey, I'm having a hard time paying my rent. I'm having a hard time trying to move. I'm having a hard time trying to give my child a sustainable life. And what can I do? And we believe there's a lot of resources out there because I believe the same thing for veterans. I thought there was going to be all of this help, all this stuff. People told me there's all this money. Oh, Amber, you can get them to pay your rent. You can get them to pay your electricity. There was nothing. There was nothing. I called everybody. I'm calling people in Luzerne. I'm calling people in Wayne County. I'm calling Harrisburg. I'm trying to figure out, what is going on. And I realized that the same thing we think with housing is there's all these programs, but a lot of them do the same thing. And also, a lot of them don't always provide you with the actual resources that you need, which is money, which is what it comes down to. I'll close with this. I called the VA, and I was trying to get a hold of a social worker. I'm a social worker as well. And I was, hey, what do you guys have? Do you guys have any programs and anything? And she's like, well, are you homeless? And I said, no. Well, we only help you if you're homeless. I said, what does that even mean? So basically, if I was a chronically homeless veteran, then I would be able to get some type of assistance. But with that assistance, I wouldn't be able to keep my dog, and I wouldn't have been able to have my daughter with me. And most of the veteran housing here is for men only. So those are barriers and different things that I had seen with me in my personal life that I wanted to share with you guys, because I figured if I didn't know that information, then a lot of you might not have known that information as well. So, thank you. So right now, I would like to reintroduce Miss Rashida. She is the president of the New Wave Enterprise, and she has some remarks for us.
Actually, if I could, Amber, I'd like to have our panelists come up. Yeah, this would be good. Can we please have our panelists this morning? Because we'll have you go on right after we do. And then we'll also give you just a brief moment to introduce yourselves, what you do, and we'll just kind of go from there. Okay, so I'm going to feign technical difficulties right out the gate. Just give me one brief moment.
Oh, thank you. Do you need help?
Sure.
Okay.
So thank you again. My name is Rashida Lovely, and I'm the lady that wears all the hats. So I am the president of a small company called New Wave Enterprise. I am the CEO of a newly found nonprofit organization, and also I am the assistant director of operations for our social organization, NEPAPAC. And I have actually stepped down last year, and Demario Bonner is now our director of operations. So please direct all the work to him. Very much appreciated. I'm gonna do my best not to get emotional. Today, we are not just discussing housing. We're defining the future of our communities. We are here to reimagine affordability, sustainability, and innovation. We are here because we believe housing is not a privilege, but a right. For too long, our cities have been trapped in a cycle: rising rents, unaffordable mortgages, families struggling to keep a roof over their heads. But what if I told you there was another way? What if we could redefine housing, making it not only affordable, but also energy efficient, self-sustaining, and technologically advanced? That is exactly what we're doing with our affordable housing project. And we're also asking that we look at an act that will help us legislatively. And we would like to call it the Lewis Energy Reduction and Home the Block Act, a legislative blueprint that will revolutionize our approach to housing in Pennsylvania and beyond. The core principles is this: we would like to lower the construction costs through passive housing design. A common misconception is that passive housing design is more expensive. The reality is it significantly reduces construction and operational costs over time. So let me just move these slides. You have fewer HVAC components that are needed because traditional building requires large HVAC systems to regulate temperature. Passive houses use airtight construction, triple pane windows, and superior insulation, reducing the need for expensive heating and cooling systems. You can also use prefabrication and modular construction. Passive design principles align well with modular and prefabricated building techniques, cutting labor and material waste by up to 20%. Faster build times means lower labor costs and quicker occupations. And that will reduce financial strain on developers. Durability and low maintenance is also a component because passive housing design are built with quality materials that last much longer. Airtight construction and controlled ventilation prevent mold, moisture damage, and wear and tear, reducing repair and maintenance costs. And again, smaller mechanical systems equals lower costs. We cannot get around that. And we live in Northeast Pennsylvania. It gets bitter cold here. So if you wanted to introduce green energy, you can't heat reasonably a building just using solar panels. It's not feasible. So by reducing heating and cooling demands by up to 90%, passive housing designs eliminate the need for large, costly mechanical systems, freeing up more of your budget for quality construction and design. By shifting the focus to passive house design, we are building structures that are not only energy efficient, but more cost effective in the long run. Green energy and technology will further cut construction costs. So while passive housing design drastically reduces energy use, the integration of green energy and smart technology will cut those costs even further during and after construction. Introducing solar panels, atmospheric water generators, and geothermal systems will eliminate utility costs. Homes that generate their own power reduce grid reliance, ensuring that utility expenses remain low or even zero for homeowners and renters. By integrating solar panels and geothermal systems during construction, you will avoid expensive retrofitting later on. So if you look at this chart, we have what's in red, which is the traditional building model. And then in green, you have the introduction of green energy. And in the blue, it's green energy plus smart technology. So blockchain, AI, and quantum tech. And if you can see where the chart is at year 1, there's not much savings there. But before you get to year 5, you can already see savings. And once you get to year 20, the savings are out of this world. And this is what we need to focus on. So when the folks say it costs too much up front to pay, we're probably spending more money in light heat and other subsidies to utility companies than we are in the savings we would have if we had put the work up front in our infrastructure. So again, blockchain and AI lowers the construction overhead. AI-driven project management reduces waste, delays, and cost overruns. Blockchain technology provides transparent, automated contracts between suppliers, contractors, and developers, reducing legal and administrative fees. And then let's get into 3D printing. Can we have some 3D printing in Northeast Pennsylvania? We can use 3D printing, smart materials to reduce waste. New technologies like 3D printing building components and sustainable self-repairing materials. Folks, there are self-repairing materials that exist that we could use in our building processes. And they cut construction waste by up to 30%. These innovations make construction faster, cheaper, and more precise, reducing labor and material costs. And then let's get into this energy efficiency. So developers can recoup costs faster because net zero homes have higher resale and rental value. Tenants and homeowners can save thousands in energy bills. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, PP&L and others said they were raising rates by the summer.
10.8%.
Now, I know the governor said he was working on stopping that, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they're telling us that if we keep overworking the grid, they have no choice but to raise rates. So shouldn't we be focusing on underwhelming our grids? Shouldn't that be how we move forward? That makes all sense in the world to me. So let me just keep going. That was a side note. A passive home pays for itself in energy savings. A typical home built to passive standards saves a homeowner $1,500 to $2,500 a year in energy bills. Community-wide savings. If an entire community adopts the passive housing principle, millions of dollars in public energy subsidies can be redirected towards other critical needs. Can we say redirect? Redirect resources for critical needs, and giving money to the utility companies and subsidies is not a critical need in my book. So we need to focus on changing that narrative. We need to put the money where it's supposed to go, and it's not in LIHEAP. So we want to lower the energy costs, we want to get energy independent, and we want a cleaner environment. I sit on the Environmental Justice Board for the Department of Environmental Protection. I travel around the state and I listen to communities tell me how much they suffer because of infrastructure, because of poor housing. And after listening to them, and also listening to the folks in NEPA, I think I have a good understanding of what the problem is, but we have to have the gumption to do what is necessary to change the narrative, and also to make the changes that are necessary, because they are very hard. So let me keep going. So that's the cost energy savings that we were just talking about. So, what we want to focus on is making sure that we're energy independent, and we also want to make sure that we have an increased walkability index. If you go around the world, and I'll give Japan as an example, Japan has one of the best walkability indexes in the entire world. Why? Because they don't try to break up their communities by residential, by industrial, by commercial. They understand that having a mixed use building is vital to a community. If you break a community up where they have to drive out to their retailers as opposed to having their retailers right in their community, it makes it more difficult for a family who's already struggling to get what they need. And God forbid they don't have the transportation. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we have things like vertical gardens, green roofs, and permeable paving, and that will create sustainable environments where people live. Now let's get to the key points, because that's going to be really important. And then I'm going to move us along. The key points of this new bill that we would love to introduce is mandating sustainable construction. So we will require that all buildings, all new buildings, and all major renovations in Pennsylvania must meet passive housing and net zero standards, drastically cutting energy use and reducing long-term costs. Then we want to expand affordable housing in underserved communities, Justice 40 communities. We want to make sure that folks that live in the most underdeveloped and underserved communities get the chance to have the quality life that they deserve first. We always want to redevelop downtown over and over and over again. It's time to go into the communities that don't get a chance to see this quality housing. We need to bring it to them. So thank goodness for this Justice 40 initiative. Now there are dollars that are available where we can put them where they belong, and that's in those working class communities and those poor communities that pay the taxes so that everybody else can get these tax breaks. Financial relief for families. This bill will establish tax credits, state tax credits, low interest financing, and grants to help families and developers afford upfront costs and sustainable housing. Utility bills will be offset through renewable energy credits, reducing financial burdens for residents. And then we want to leverage technology for efficiency and access. And here's the part where it's going to go over a lot of folks' head, but just walk through this. This bill will promote blockchain-based energy monitoring, cryptocurrency rents and mortgage payments, and AI-driven maintenance to streamline costs and prevent financial instability. The creation of a Pennsylvania green crypto token will incentivize developers to exceed efficiencies requirements and fund future sustainable housing projects. Now, I'm sure folks will be saying, well, where are they doing all this at? Because, we don't have that here. You're right. But let's just say we put it here. Guess what we will get? If we focus on having things like blockchain in our infrastructure, we can end up with internet for all. Imagine where you come home one day and you have free internet. You have net zero utilities. all because we need to have these new technologies in place, and we can't have them in place without internet. So the developers and the landlords can absorb those costs because it'll be so much cheaper. And where's it being done? There are developers in the city of Wilkesboro who are using these models, and because it has become so cheap for them, they were able to absorb the costs. Also in the I think it's Allegheny County, if I'm not mistaken, I was told by a member of the DEP that there is a facility that was built net zero, and they've had great success with it. So it's being done, sprinkled throughout the state, but we need to do it as a large initiative. Somebody, I don't know where my time is. All right, so.
You're good.
Okay, so I personally, I like to look forward. I like us to be pioneers. But for the folks who are scary and they're thinking, well, where are we doing this stuff at? Where's this space economy stuff going on at? So these are cities where it's taking place. So the city of Baltimore and the city of Reno, they have now officially used blockchain technology to record their abandoned and neglected housing and their housing stock in general. The city of Austin, the city of Detroit, the city of Chicago, the city of William Lakes, and the city of Williston used cryptocurrency officially to pay their income taxes and their real estate taxes. So this is something that can be incorporated, and it's being done across the country. So our leadership. When I brought this idea to them, former Congressman Cartwright was already on board because he was space economy. And I was like, this is great. Who else can we get on board? So we have our Senator Marty Flynn, Kyle Mullins, Kyle Donahue, Bridget Kalkowski, Eddie Kuczynski, all signed on and said, if this is going to help us get affordable housing, we need to do it. And so they came on board. And now we're starting our very first housing project, a blockchain-powered, all energy included, internet included, multifamily unit, mixed use, community space, and also a retail space called Welby Court. And it's going to be located at 925 Slocum Ave and Cedar Ave, right across the street from South Intermediate School. Why there? We put it there because we want families to utilize the space. And we want them to be able to take their kids right across the street to go to school. They bring them right on back and go into the community room where they can focus on homework and have mentorship. And then go right around the corner to the retail where they can get groceries for pennies on the dollar. That's how we are supposed to be living. How do we do this? See this funny device up there? It's called a blockchain sensor. What I would love to see us do is incorporate these blockchain sensors into our facilities. This is infrastructure. We're talking about doing something that has technically never been done anywhere in the United States. And by us putting these devices into our homes, what we will do is we will have the first 3D blockchain systems it will cause us to have smart systems, will then allow us to have all that free internet and all these other wonderful things that we need. And then we can start looking at smart regions. And this is just the beginning. This state is a great state, and it was a pioneer state in the beginning. And we need to get back to pioneering now. We haven't had the opportunity to do something new and fresh and innovative, and I believe in NEPA, we have the people, we have the right resources where we can do so. So I'm going to leave this part here. I believe that our counties and our folks and our orgs and our leadership understand the importance of bringing innovation and bringing much needed and quality housing to our communities. We're here to serve, but we can't serve unless we're willing to do the hard work. So if we want to be the folks who look into the future to say what we want to see, this moment right now is our opportunity, because we're in uncertain times, and these are actually the times where the work gets done, not when it's safe. So I believe this is what we should be focused on, and I hope that folks will be willing to work together to accomplish this goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That was very beautiful and very heartfelt. So next, I I would like to introduce Clancy Harris from the Food Dignity Program.
Do you see how to click? Okay, there we go.
Woo. All right, so my name is Clancy. I am the founder of the Food Dignity Movement. I'm in the Luzerne County area. I believe that food is a right, and this is probably of all my slides the most important slide you are going to see, because at the end of the day, food is not a right. At the end of the day, if you look at that bridge, in order for it to be a right, food insecurity, we need to be able to access food. Food that we want to eat, food that's going to nourish us, food that is going to build a resilient local economy. And as long as hunger and poverty exist, our bridges are down. So I want you to visualize all of those pillars on the bridge and what needs to be in place to create food as a right. And so you can think of it as you as an individual, you can think of it as Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, the United States, or as the globe. And I can tell you as someone who has been fighting hunger for nearly 30 years, I can tell you my bridge is still up. Because hunger and poverty exist. And we all have work to do, and it starts with us challenging our own hidden bias and saying, where are we actually creating the barriers to food access? Because we don't know what we don't know. And it's our job to learn every single day. So a couple years, just so you know, I did run a food pantry in Kingston, Pennsylvania for 13 years. During that time, I uncovered my own internal hidden bias, and I do that every day. And that has gotten me to where I am now. And I can tell you I stopped fighting hunger, and now we fight for food equity. And so what does that mean? That means we challenge ourselves to do better, but we also challenge organizations that are fighting hunger, right? So I was asked to give the link between housing and food insecurity, and I want to tell you a story that will hopefully illustrate what you see on the screen. So when we were at the food pantry, we went to a drive-through operation. We went from serving 150 people at each distribution to nearly 3,000 people. And we would have a line of cars that would wrap around for up to 2 miles, and they would wait in line on average an hour per mile. So we had people waiting in line for 2 hours, up to 2 hours. And what happened is, now we never solicited for donations. We never did that. But if someone said, here's $5, here's $1, here's $20, we took it because we looked at that as dignity. But at the end of the line, when we ran out of the whole chickens, when we ran out of the milk, we would say, here's $10. Please go to the grocery store, get whatever you need. We put that right back into the line. And on this one particular day, I was down to a $5 bill and 3 $1 bills. And it was like the ugly money, right? It was the money that was like rotted, had a lot of artwork on it. It was dirty. And I thought to myself, I can't give this lady $8. It's gonna embarrass her. And it's not even pretty, it's not even crisp. And that voice that I had inside myself said, Clancy, you're actually the person creating the shame just by having that thought. All you have to do is give her the money and walk away. So I gave her the money, have a nice day, get whatever you need, this is the last of the donations. And she started crying, and she said, everyone in our house lost their job except her son. They were using their last drop of gas to get to the food pantry because they had to eat. She said, you just gave me gas money. My son can get to work tomorrow. In that moment, I thought, okay, here I am projecting my privilege onto someone, creating what I think $8 would be. And at the end of the day, people face daily dilemmas in whether they're going to use their money to buy gas, whether they're going to use their money to buy diapers, whether they're going to have heat in the winter. And food is one of the first things that go. And what happens if you didn't have money to get to work the next day? What happens if that person missed their job? Then they have a deducted paycheck. What if they lose their job? Then they start getting into this housing instability. Now think about the types of food that are typically served at a food pantry. Are we giving people food, one that they want to eat, two that's nourishing their body? Are we gatekeeping that? Or are we giving people food that they need to eat based off of their medical history, based off their culture? Because at the end of the day, if we're not giving people the food, and I shouldn't even say giving, but how are we creating an environment where we have our own agency and we're getting food that's going to create a nourishing society? Because we have to have a strong workforce, so this is all interplayed. And at the end of the day, the food system is working the way it's supposed to work. A lot of people say it's broken, and I'm going to tell you it is working the way it's supposed to work, and we need to change that. Because we have a lot of inequities that are happening. We have a lot of structural oppression. If you look at zip codes, it dictates what grocery stores are in your area. It dictates the type of food that's in that grocer. It dictates whether you can get to a grocery store or not, whether you can walk to a grocery store if you have public transportation. So how can we start changing these systems? How can we start being innovative? And who is the gatekeeper? Who's the gatekeeper in our community that decides what you get or don't get? What food pantry gets the most food and what food pantry gets the least food? Because I can tell you that happens. I was part of the system for 13 years. At the end of the day, the majority of all state and federal funds that come into Pennsylvania go directly to the Feeding America Network. We don't even have access, the people on the ground doing the work have access to even apply for these fundings. So I'm talking about state purchase program, the PASS program, that's the Pennsylvania Agriculture Surplus, TPAP, that's the Emergency Food System, LFPA. LFPA is the Local Food Purchasing Program. Any elected officials in this room, we have until April to decide as a state how we're going to allocate those funds. Can we open up, carve out some of those funds so people who are on the ground doing the work have access to use those funds to invest into their local economy? There's a 400-mile radius with that program. And I can tell you when food banks get it, they buy food from the Mark Middleland Co-op and they're investing in other states, not our local economy. But our local people can work with our local farmers and get food that we want to eat. The other issue with the inequitable funding distribution in our state, not only do the food banks get the state and federal, they get the majority of the corporation partnerships and they get the majority of the foundational partnerships. And so all I'm asking is how do we start advocating for just a piece, just the ability to apply, the ability to give us a chance to show that our programs work because we know what our community needs. We are working with Penn State University to do a statewide survey, so I'm looking for people that wants to be on a focus group. That statewide survey is going to be interviewing people who are on the ground doing the work. Usually our voices are not heard, it's usually the voice of the bigger organizations getting the funding. And so I believe this is going to be groundbreaking because we're going to be able to identify where the barriers are, where the gaps, what do you want, what do you need, and then how to allocate some of the state funding to help you create the programs that you need. And if you want to sign my petition, I do have a petition to get LFPA to open up to outside of the food banking world. Because at the end of the day, food is power. And unfortunately, it's been used as power against many people. And we need to reclaim that power. The other thing I want to point out as it relates to food insecurity, the USDA has all these great definitions. And I'm not going to get into what those definitions are. What I want to point out is that the USDA does not have any income guidelines on what those definitions are. But if we start looking at SNAP, love WIC, and I believe it or not, I do love food banks, there's a place for them. But when we start looking at these programs, they do have income guidelines. So how has that socially created a definition? How has that helped us perceive what hunger is? Did it put it in a charity box over here and, oh, you have to meet these guidelines or you don't qualify and you don't get food? Or can we have a broader definition? And at the end of the day, 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and that paycheck to paycheck can put them in housing insecurity. And so who are we missing in the United States that we're not working with or in our own community? So how do we broaden our personal definition and truly understand? And we're getting away from using the word hunger or food insecurity. I'm starting to talk about food stress. I think we can all identify, like, okay, the prices of eggs, that's like the big one right now if you look on social media, right? But any type of inflation, how does that impact people and how does that start to create that food stress? And so what we need to do is if we're gonna create food security, how do we create systems that work for us? Systems that create food equity, systems that invest in our local economy, that create workforce development, that create jobs for us. And that's what we've been doing. We've gotten away from counting meals served, and we started saying, how are we improving the sustainability of our local agriculture? Because I can tell you right now, once our local farmers go away and that turns into asphalt and warehouses, we're gonna be all facing food insecurity. This is investment into our future. So if there's a surplus, why are we waiting until there's a surplus with the farmer and then asking them to just donate their food? We missed something if there's a surplus. We missed an opportunity to create a market for our local agriculture. And so one of the things that we're looking at, we brag that we don't have warehousing or trucking logistics. We don't even have rent because we build the capacity of the nonprofits that we work with. We help build their infrastructure. We work with our farmers to build their capacity. We work to build those relationships. That way when food dignity goes away, hopefully it never will. But if it did, we can say, guess what? We have those relationships over there. We walked away after it was created. And we created a sustainable way of paying the farmers. So that is creating economic development. It's preventing food loss. It's investing in our environment. It's creating nutrition security for everyone. And so again, this slide just wraps it up, and I know we're limited on time. But my question to you is, how do we start looking at a system and changing it? How do we get creative and stop putting the same effort into the status quo? Because at the end of the day, we need to work together. I always say nonprofits, the smaller nonprofits, it's like, here's a bone, there's the junkyard, go fight over the scraps, everyone. And while we're fighting over the scraps, the big dogs keep getting all the funding, and we're not. And so how do we start changing that? And the only way we can change that is by joining forces, by working together, by showing, yes, housing and food work together, health, housing, and food work together. If we're doing similar work, we're not competing. Let's complement each other and help each other and elevate each other. And so I always like to say, hunger is never going to end until we actually put aside our egos, put aside and start learning about our biases and say, where am I wrong? Where am I actually creating barriers, even if I have the best intention? And what do I need to do to change that? So your bridge can start going down so we can create food equity for everyone. So with that, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Rashida, this is an awesome work.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I would like to remind everyone that there are QR codes around, so make sure that you guys scan the QR code so that you can take the survey and then put in any questions that you would like to have. So right now, we are going to talk to our wonderful panelists. So I'm going to introduce you guys, your names and your titles, but then I would also like you guys to start and give yourselves a brief introduction. You don't have to, again. But we have Joe Savage, Jr., PhD, who is the Regional Director of Interagency Council on Homelessness. We have Drew Simpson, Regional Council Representative of the Carpenters Union, and Kevin O'Boyle, Marisol Commercial Real Estate, and also we have Clancy Harris. So we can start down at the bottom. Sir, if you could make sure the mic is on.
Is it the bottom?
There you go.
I'm Kevin O'Boyle. I'm the Vice President of Strategy for Marisol Commercial Real Estate Services. I'm also the Board President for the Wyoming Valley YMCA in Luzerne County that represents the Ys in Pittston, Wilkes-Barre, and Hazleton. I'm just really honored to be here today.
Joe Savage, I'm glad to be here today as well. I'm a Senior Regional Advisor with the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. We are the federal government's entity that's responsible for developing homeless policy. And we do that through coordinating 19 federal agencies that makes up our council. And we make sure that there's a common vision, a common goal across those agencies for what it means to prevent and end homelessness.
My name is Drew Simpson. I'm the Regional Manager for the Carpenters Union. I cover 60 of the 67 counties of the state of Pennsylvania. So I have offices in Scranton, Lebanon, Douglasville, and Pittsburgh. And I can say, right, you know, with all certainty that this is not just a Scranton or Northeastern Pennsylvania issue, this is a statewide issue. I looked at some of these questions here, the issue you gave me, and I'm thinking, I don't even know what I'm going to say. I can't, you know, we are more into the workforce development and offering people opportunities at a career in the Carpenters Union. But I do hopefully have a couple things to add here to the, but I appreciate it. It's always a great opportunity to be able to meet with a group of people that are so passionate about the subject, and we're hopefully being able to add something today. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So I'm going to ask you guys a question, and then any of you guys can take it, but I would like to hear from all of you, just to hear a little 2 cents in on these questions. So the first one is, what are the biggest barriers your organization sees in providing housing, food assistance to those in needs? And what policy changes would you like to see help address those challenges to your specific agency?
So I'll start with one. I really enjoyed Rashida's site selection choice by the school. That's very smart. Any development project, it starts with location and where you choose to site these projects. We have no shortage of land in northeastern Pennsylvania, but every site is unique and has unique challenges and the highest and best use for what it be used for. And while with unique challenges, some land sites are more developable than others, and there needs to first be an exercise of to solve this problem at scale, what are the sites across our region that are most suitable for mixed use? So that can be prioritized, and then comes the zoning conversation, and can you get that approved? Because to Rashida's point, like the example there, it's not like putting in commercial and industrial would provide more land available opportunities, but is that the best place? Putting in your schools, that's a great benefit, that saves the school money on logistics and whatnot as well. So people could walk places and have retail nearby. So first step is where is the affordable housing needed most in our communities across the region?
Thank you.
There's a lot of different ways I could have approached answering this question. And, you know, just speaking at the federal level, the federal government, we're a funder. We don't provide programs, at least not a lot of programs, but we are a funder. So in my opinion, one of the biggest barriers is simply the demand exceeds the supply. There just isn't enough. There isn't enough affordable housing. There isn't enough access to food to meet the demand. And the policy changes that we would like to see at the federal level really has to do with giving communities more funding to meet this demand. And the biggest barrier to that, believe it or not, within our country, if you ever look at the history of social welfare policy, there is a perception between the worthy and the unworthy poor. If you are the worthy poor, then you're going to get funding, you're going to get what you need to address your issues. But if you fall under the unworthy poor, that those are the individuals that are struggling with mental health issues, substance use issues, single mothers, where they are viewed as being in their situation as a result of their own personal moral failure. And because they are the unworthy poor, they don't deserve to get funding. They don't deserve to get the dollars until they correct their moral failure. So when we look at funding at the federal level, the biggest barrier is this perception between the worthy and the unworthy poor. And we need to understand that when we're talking about the lack of affordable housing, the lack of access to food, it has nothing to do with anyone's personal moral failures. We have some serious systemic issues that are deeply ingrained in our country, that are historical. And when we can begin to change those perceptions among those who are in Congress, then we can see policy changes related to the funding, and then we can start to see enough funding to meet the demand. And just real quick, when we talk about affordable housing, we have to make sure that we are talking about housing for all income levels that goes deep. For most communities in the work that I see, when they say affordable housing, they're talking about affordable housing for the workforce, nurses, EMTs, teachers, and yes, that is needed. But you know who's not accessing that affordable housing? Very low income households, households that are experiencing homelessness. They are still shut out of affordable housing. So we have to get affordable housing that runs deep enough.
Looking at it from a construction standpoint, the city of Scranton had always been, there's a lot of barriers in the city of Scranton when you wanted to build anything. Hopefully there's a way for the city of Scranton here. I will say one thing, Mayor Continetti has worked very hard in breaking down some of the barriers for the construction industry for new construction. She has completely revamped the zoning and permitting process, so she's made it much easier, streamlined it, so, you know, where it used to take maybe 2-3 months to get a permit to build something, it has now been streamlined very, very well. So I give the mayor credit in trying to fix something that has been a long-standing issue in the city when it comes to the construction side of it. One of the other barriers is, as you just mentioned, public perception. My father-in-law always had a saying that, you know, the city of Scranton was full of cave people, citizens against virtually everything. And, you know, and while it's gotten a lot better in the 38 odd years I've lived here, there's still issues. And, you know, we have some very good developers who have done a lot of great things in the city of Scranton, buying old buildings and you know, maybe they claim that they're affordable housing that they're building in downtown living. It's not affordable housing. So I think, you know, the Charlie Jeffersons of the world, the John Massalikas of the world, the developers who are buying all this land up, all these buildings up in the city of Scranton and turning them into multifamily living, you know, maybe they need to get on the hook here a little bit and say, okay, we've built these buildings here, we've renovated these buildings, now let's do something that's truly, you know, a building for affordable housing. Let's get them on the hook.
Wow, so I'm coming from a food insecurity lens, obviously, and certainly I think advocating for funding for people on the ground is really important. But how many times do we have to ask someone if they're hungry before we believe them or help them? How many times? And how do we start advocating for SNAP and WIC? SNAP, and I'm gonna give, I think this is just more of a pointer when you're talking to elected officials and you're advocating for SNAP. Let's start talking about how to invest back into our local economy. It's a turnaround investment. And when we start using that language with our current administration, we might get them to lean in and listen a little bit more. I had to go to a meeting in Harrisburg once, and it was a while ago when they were trying to get soda off of SNAP. And I'm like, why isn't there a retailer? Why isn't there a retailer around? And so I called up Joe from Garrity's, and I said, how do you feel about this? And he said, Clancy, our grocery store would not be able to survive if it wasn't for SNAP or WIC. And that stuck with me. That stuck with me. But are we talking about that with our elected officials? That's going to get them to listen. And so just start thinking about how you're going to change your language when we're advocating for something like SNAP, because that's a major story that he told me. So I'll just leave it at that.
I think I just want to add something as what a lot of you guys were saying is when you're talking about SNAP, I think the face of SNAP and the face of people who are worthy, you know, that thing kind of intersects with each other. So I'm a vet. I'm disabled. I was on SNAP for 2 months before I ended up getting canceled because I ended up becoming 100% disabled. But it was great for those 2 months. But when I would tell people that I used it, people were shocked, you know, because they're like, oh my God, you don't look like a poor. You know, but the amount of people that I know that use SNAP, that are using government programs and different things is so high, and there's so many people who use it who are actually deemed worthy that nobody just knows they're the people that are using it too. And so the face of those things is really, I think that's what we need to transform. And I think with our elected officials, I know for me, a lot of it is being honest about the situations I'm in and being a voice for people who also have been in those situations so that we can show people that, yeah, there's going to be people who have mental health issues and drug addiction issues and everything, but there's also people who are working and struggling just because they're working and struggling, you know, and different things like that. So I'm going to go on to the next question. What community-led initiatives have been most effective in improving housing and food security? And how can we get those programs to be more ramped up and supported by the government and also private sector partners?
This doesn't necessarily pertain to housing and food security, but I think it's an example, it's a story of what our region went through. And there's a parallel in terms of the scale of the problem that they were trying to solve. So I have to go back 80 years. So when coal mining disappeared overnight in the 40s, how do you replace 50% or 60% of your economic output in a region when it just happened, globally, everywhere you go? And at the time, it was the nonprofits, it was the chambers of commerce. Each chamber of commerce that happened in Hazleton and Wilkes-Barre and Scranton and Pittston, they developed, each chamber had an industrial development arm, economic development arm, that filled the role of developer of last resort. Or at least that's the term that we use in the space for what these people did, and they called them that because private capital wasn't interested in coming in to address the problem because it was too big for them or too risky for them, or they didn't understand how private capital could come in and exit in a way that made sense for them. So the scale, the depth of housing needed to be truly affordable to actually hit the very low-income households, we're talking a significant effort with significant development in multiple areas. So there are partners needed on the land development side, and who is the right player, because it's a gap. It's a gap to go and prepare those land sites and to get them ready for vertical construction that Rashid outlines. And then there's that player. Then the person who does the vertical construction is a very different player than the person who gets the land ready with all the necessary utilities and everything else. So if we don't find, we may need to create the agencies necessary to fill the gaps because we may have a similar developer of the last resort scenario here.
And if you heard what Kevin said, he talked a lot about what individual entities or groups do. And the thing that I've seen work in most communities that have made them successful is when they operate together in partnerships and collaboration. I think Clancy's last slide fills in like the word silos. When programs are operating in silos, nothing's getting done. And so you have to have those partnerships and those collaborations. And that's what I've seen across this country working. And one of those key partners is your communities of faith. We talked about the idea of perception earlier. Cave people may come to your city council meeting and complain, and you cannot change their perception. But guess what? People listen to their priests. People listen to their rabbi and their imam. They are key partners in getting awareness and education out. And then the final thing that I've seen work successfully, you have to think about how your programs are being marketed. In Philadelphia, when those COVID dollars came down for that rental assistance, we were getting calls off the hook for the rental assistance, and the money was going out the door. But guess what? Very few persons of color were calling in for the rental assistance. And when we did some investigating, we found out they didn't know the program existed because of how we were marketing and targeting the program. So when you're marketing and targeting the program to the areas that are needed the most in a way that they have access to, then you're going to have even more success. And to scale it, you need that political support. Those mayors, those city council members need to be on board with this. And the biggest way to get them on board, talk to them about the money. Talk to them about the cost savings in the long run that will be to the local government if they're able to support and implement these kind of initiatives.
I know there's some people in the room here were at a roundtable that we had a couple of weeks ago with the governor's offices for the PA Housing Action Plan, addressing the housing issue. I know Rashid was there. I think this is probably a very good opportunity to be having these discussions because you have a governor who I believe is on board with this. In his budget address, he's looking at putting a lot of money into housing, affordable housing. We have state reps in this area that are fantastic and will work very hard for the people in this area. So I think this may be if there is a perfect storm of opportunity and time, this may be the time. because I think we have the backing, we have the support. We just need to get everybody else on board to provide the properties, and provide the opportunities to build these facilities.
Yeah, so I think for me, programming, or I'm going to say funding that came available that made a big difference was the ARPA funding, the COVID money. I don't know how you did it in Lackawanna County, but in Luzerne County, the RFP came out and it was an anonymous scoring system. So guess what happened? The people who are on the ground doing the work got significant funding because people didn't know that they were the ones going to get funding. At the end of the day, if you know someone, you get funding, and it's friends, and it's giving money back and forth to each other. And when that was anonymous, we scored just as high or higher than organizations that constantly get funding over and over again. And so we had the ability to create change. We were able to be creative. We were able to be innovative. So again, how do we start being more equitable in how we disperse our funding and not keep giving it to our friends?
So another question here, what long-term strategies should be pursued to address the root causes of housing and food insecurity that go beyond just short-term systems, like go beyond using the food banks and food pantries and things like that?
In the development space, we're really encouraged by the current economic development plan put forth by the state of Pennsylvania. It's a very strong program. PA Sites, Representative Donahue helped write some of that legislation. That's, we think, one of the keys, because our economy is not growing, you know. So at some level, like you need the incomes to rise too, and that solves half the equation. You need affordable housing. But with more jobs comes more competition, comes higher wages, with better jobs, better wages. So the government's plan focuses on 5 sectors: manufacturing, life sciences, agriculture, energy, tech. That's huge. But what we see in our plan, the key to recruiting employers is having product that they can quickly move into when a company makes a decision to move to an area. They don't decide 4 years in advance; they decide 6 or 9 months in advance. Just like when a family is ready to move, you know, it's like I need to move now. So the product needs to be there. So they're incentivizing speculative development to help accelerate the recruitment of businesses to Pennsylvania. And they're modeling off of the successes in Ohio and elsewhere that have put far more dollars into these programs to drive economic growth in Pennsylvania. So we're playing catch up there a little bit, but that's going to help a lot. There's a version of the PA Sites program for multifamily housing. So I'm happy that they did that right after they did the PA Sites program, because that goes along with it. But the more that we can bring manufacturing, life science, and businesses to the area, that's going to drive higher wages. We continue to see the retail sector is declining, you know, and industrial is growing, and industrial does pay a much better wage than retail does. So as that, we can continue, even though jobs aren't growing, we're experiencing wage growth in these sectors. So just economic empowerment and jobs is one key part of the long-term solution.
I think Kevin hit it on the nail with that economic empowerment. People need to make a living wage. And not only that, we're seeing our society shift, especially with things like the emergence of AI and advances in technology. We need to have more employment training and workforce development, because for some people, their current skills are essentially being phased out. And we need to be able to transition them to newer skills. But also in the long term, we need to address a lot of the systemic issues that created the inequities that we're seeing today. You know, things were overt in the past where there were open discrimination policies, redlining, etc. Zoning was actually developed as a means to keep persons of color out of certain neighborhoods. And so it was covert. A lot of those systemic issues, while that language has been taken out of the books, it's now very covert. It's now very subtle. It's now very hidden. And so we still have a job to do when we're talking about battling those systemic issues where people are being discriminated against because of their color, because of their disability, because of their race or their gender or sexual orientation. We're still dealing with those systemic issues, and we really need to make sure that we're addressing those things in the long term. Listen, someone's gender identity has nothing to do with their right to get housing. Housing is a human right. And so that's a right for all of us, regardless of our color, regardless of our ableness. It is a human right, and we have to address those systemic issues that are still discriminating against certain populations.
I want to thank Kevin and the doctor for allowing me on the softball here, talking about wages and family sustaining wages. The Carpenters Union, and I'll speak for all trades, even though I represent the Carpenters Union, we all have apprenticeship programs, and our apprenticeship programs are tuition free. It's a 4-year apprenticeship program, and as we advertise, it's earn while you learn. Our apprentices come in, they're out working on the job sites, they go to training 1 week a quarter, and while they're learning on the job site and getting paid to be on the job site, they are also, when they're training in our training centers, they are learning down in the training center as well. We are, DEI is very important to us. And yes, I said DEI. I think the rest of we started a program here in the fall, and I know the ladies are familiar with this. It's called the CART program, Carpenter Apprentice Readiness Program. It's a pre-apprentice 8-week course, and it's geared towards inner city youth who do not have a career possibility or opportunity. For the first time, we had 8 or 9 people start. I think we had 7 graduate. And it took a little while to get this thing off the ground. We started this in Philadelphia because obviously the bigger, people of color in that area. And then we moved to Pittsburgh and we brought it to spring. And I thank everybody in this room that may have, everybody we interviewed for the program. We asked how they heard about it, and every one of them said, "My mom told me about it." So at least it got to the moms. But the group of young men that we had that went through this program, we couldn't have asked for a better start, a better kickoff. On our graduation that we had for everybody, the parents were there, the families were there. It was great to see, the camaraderie that they had amongst themselves. So we try hard. We pride ourselves in family sustaining wages. We pride ourselves in benefit packages. That includes healthcare, annuity programs, pension programs. We pay for everything ourselves. Our international spends over $200 million a year in training. That's our apprenticeship programs, and that's our journeyman upgrade training programs. We pay for that out of hourly deductions of every one of our members that work. We don't ask for state money, we don't ask for federal money. We do that ourselves. So we reach out, we go to all the schools, we go to all the career days, we go to every place. Matter of fact, one of my partners right now is at the Chamber of Commerce for a workforce development or teachers in the workforce seminar right now, talking to them. Because even in today's world, it's very hard to get the teachers to understand that the trades are a viable option. There are kids who don't want to go to college. I didn't go to college. I needed something to do. I went through the apprenticeship program 38 years ago, and here I am now. So we pride ourselves in training. We pride ourselves in giving the youth of the area opportunities, and it doesn't have to be youth. We have apprentices that are 20, 30 years old that have decided that a lot of them are college graduates that decided that hey, I got out of college, I have $100,000 in debt, and now I want to change my career. So anybody here today that wants to talk about it, wants to help us, wants to give us, because we're having problems trying to find people that are interested in our apprenticeship program. So, thank you.
So, I'm going to just pose another question. Why do we keep making people prove their worthiness for expired end-of-life food that was going to go to a dumpster? We need to take food rescue out of the hunger equation. I'm not against saving the environment, but stop dumping it on food pantries. And I'm we actually would triage our food and put it in a dumpster. And we would have to pay a dumpster bill. We became a trash can for people for 13 years running a food pantry. And so how do we start taking the charity out of the charitable food system? How do we stop the volunteer mindset and start paying people to do this work? How do we start creating nutrition economics where we're investing in our local agriculture, our local retailers, keeping that money local? People deserve dignity, and go rescue food, but you eat it. Stop giving it to people who are food insecure.
I know that for the city of Scranton, we have a big technological gap with our workforce. I worked as an HR director for a while, and we were still using paper checks when I came in, and that's an example I used. So I think there's a big gap between the incomes that's also technological, which also feeds into a lot of issues because then people just aren't trained and aren't ready. And you're trying to tell people to apply for a job and they're still using a flip phone and they can't, get on and apply for a job. And there are people who don't have internet access at their house and different things like that. So I think COVID showed us that a lot, but we got to fix that technological gap. So with that, but we are going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to do a question and answer time. So if any of you guys have questions for our panelists, yes. I would ask that you come up and grab a mic and just quickly introduce yourself and maybe just say like where you're from first, and then we'll go ahead and get started. And we ask you guys, keep it brief.
And my question is actually piggybacking off for Clancy. You mentioned throwing away food. I went into a grocery store one day and I sat there and watched them behind the counter opening food to throw away. How do you get those companies involved instead of wasting because it came to the drugstore and they don't sell, because that was the reason, they don't sell that product and they don't want people dumpster diving, so they're gonna open it and waste it. How do we, like we're pulling Vaseline, all the Vaseline goes in the Charleses and for housing, how do we get our local companies to stop giving us old food to clear their shelves?
Yeah, good question. I think one really great example would be how can we start getting WIC approved at Walgreens or your Dollar General, right? Where they might have a lot of milk and they're going to dump it because they don't sell it. But a single mom can walk to the Dollar General or Walgreens and you can get bread, you can get peanut butter. How can we get our corporations to start being innovative, coming up with like sales or something that they're doing right there, getting rid of the food on site, whatever that looks like for them. So that's my answer. It just comes down to being innovative. And I'm actually on the working group at Tufts University, and it's about nutrition economics and addressing that exact thing with the Cargills, with the Krogers, with Instacart. And so we are working on that on a national level.
One last question. You just said it, WIC. I don't know if anybody knows, but as a parent, I do know this. 3 kids later, WIC is capped at 5. How do you tell a parent that at 5 years old your child is not offered nutritional food?
Yeah, we have to advocate for WIC, big time. Good question, right? I do a lot of work on the national level with WIC, and we are advocating for changes with that. But then also making sure people have access to their SNAP and advocating for expansion of that too. It's a lot of advocacy work.
A lot of people don't know they qualify for WIC, and I know the statistics for the maternal death rate actually are lower with women and families who are using WIC. So there's a lot of more long-term effects with just the WIC program than just nutrition. It actually is saving people's lives and saving infants' lives as well.
Thank you. I probably don't need the mic. With the government, I'm going to call it reorganization, going on right now. And USAID, and I almost cry when I think about USAID and what was done to it, because I saw in Afghanistan on the ground and in Uganda on the ground what it did. But there's also farmers who are now going out of business because of USAID going away. Can we get some of that food? I'm sorry. from the farmers, because when we fed the homeless in Jersey, I wasn't an organization, and we had so much food donated to us. So I don't know how we were able to get all of that food, and we weren't an organization. So I have some thoughts on that. And I gotta just say this, we're acting like the government is the same, and it's not. And the money that was given from the government is not going to be there. So what are our ideas, our plans to get the money? WIC may not be there, SNAP may not be there, okay?
6 years of farming, this is the second year in a row they stayed open year round. Did you know you can buy Pennsylvania storage crop all year round? And so their farm stand is staying open because they know we're purchasing their crops and they're aggregating. So if Farmer John loses his tomatoes to bugs or something, we know we can buy his secondary crop of onions. And we're making sure that he has, or she, has a sustainable outcome at the end of the year. And so it's how do we start being creative and having those. And I'll tell you right now, farmers did not want to work with me. They did not have trust because they're always being asked to donate. And I had to prove my worth. I had to prove my trust. I had to get their trust to work with me. And now we have a bunch of farmers who are like, okay, let's do this. But to work in the environment that we are today, we need to change our language. We need to look at the way we're talking about this as investing in economic. So I don't say we're fighting hunger. I don't say that we're counting meals and we're throwing it at people. I'm saying, how did we improve the outcome of this farmer? And guess what? The Republicans are like leaning in and they're like, I want to know more. I want to know more. So what are the values of the people that you're talking to, and get rid of your darlings, right? Like my darling is hunger. But I know if I go in and I'm coming from that viewpoint and I'm not meeting someone where what their value is, then I made a big mistake. And so how do I start learning what's important to that person and equate my outcomes to what their strategic plan is and their values? And you can do that with food. You can probably do that with housing. But it's just thinking about working about it. And I'm happy to jump on a Zoom and brainstorm that kind of language in this environment because it's important.
So then you guys want to take it?
And the government, I'm sorry, the government, right? I mean, we don't know, from day to day right now, we don't know.
I know, but we're trying to keep it not political though. Just so we're not.
It's not political, but this is where is the money. I'm thinking money. So I'm not looking government so much, but as a realistic fact of the money that was coming from there, what are we substituting now? Just brainstorming, we need to substitute where that money's coming from.
I think I'll reiterate something that Clancy said. In light of the current environment and everything that's going on, and as you all can imagine, I'm being very careful about my answer in my head. Communities are going to have to get innovative in terms of what partnerships and collaborations can we develop to make up for what we may end up losing. And if you do need that support that comes from the federal level, but there's a very big political perspective that influences that, then find out what their carrot at the end of the stick is. I know for a lot of people, the carrot at the end of their stick isn't homelessness. But if I go in and I talk about savings to the government, they're like, oh, wait a minute, talk to me more about that. And so finding out what their carrot at the end of the stick is and using that as your inroads to get to your issue.
Anybody else have anything else for that? All right, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Farah. I'll try to keep this short and not have a panic attack. I have a question. I recently founded the first national cooperative chamber of commerce, and from my research and from my personal experience as an entrepreneur and just knowing that most small businesses fail, I realized that cooperative businesses, however, have over a 70% success rate, and it's because as we practice conscious consumerism, we practice group economics, and we make sure that our dollars stay within and circulate within our communities. And so, I'm sure, and I realized just through speaking to people that most people have never heard of a food co-op. And so, especially in Pennsylvania, I'm from New York, so, coming out here and seeing all the land, I was recently able to buy almost 1.5 acres of land, and, but then you have to, of course, you learn about the zoning laws and what's the R1 zone and this, and so they're looking into density and agriculture and commercial. But with all that aside, I'll just use my town as an example, Wilkes-Barre City, right? We have maybe 3 supermarkets, but then next to a highly dense area where there's a lot of low-income housing, then the next town over, we have Walmart, we have Wegmans, we have Sam's Club that Walmart owns, and then we have Price Chopper, and then we have Target. And so my thing is that while I understand federal funding is important, we're leaving a whole lot of money on the table, and they're our dollars, whether you're paying through your cash or whether you're paying through SNAP EBT. Millions upon millions of dollars we're pouring into private corporations, and if we just took that money back and opened up what I would love to see, food dignity supermarkets that are owned by us, and we grow our own food, and we partner with farmers who share our, our ethics, because I think it's unethical to hire other people than, instead of hiring, us, we have to look at things from both angles. We would be able, there would be no homeless. There would be no homeless people if we actually just kept our dollars within our own communities and partnered with schools to train young adults in trades, and so that we can build our own housing. And if we grew hemp, with the green hempcrete, most people have never heard of that. And so we can actually do a lot. I believe federal funding should be like a cherry on top. But if we sit here and we wait, we honestly have no one to blame ourselves but ourselves, when all we have to do is take our power back by saying, yes, for me, I can say this, black owned or woman owned. But if that black owned business or woman owned business or even a veteran business is not someone in my local community that is contributing towards, that's paying taxes in my town, that will contribute towards the quality of our school system and my fire department and my police department, it doesn't serve me or my children or your children. So to me, it's about doing our homework and learning how, just how this world really works. And we're late. We're not fashionably late. We are behind. Okay, we get excited. We love Pepsi. Who owns Pepsi? We love Amazon. It's so convenient. But convenience has cost us. Because we want it now. We want it now. It's so fun. How many Amazon packages can I have on my front porch? Now, I'm sorry, but look at this. So I don't know if that's a question, but...
So Kevin said some things that really caught me, and I'm hoping you can answer just a couple of those if possible. So the governor did have this initiative, I believe it was, I think it ended the end of that year, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the mixed use building grant. I believe it was like, I don't think he had like a 50-50 share, but if you had some skin in the game, you can apply for a grant to do mixed use buildings across the state. And I really didn't see much of a focus in it. Do you think that there is an appetite amongst the developers to kind of focus on that passive design model within that grant opportunity? Is that something you think we can ask the governor to kind of focus in on? Because like I said, I did not see anything that was really like focused in it. So do you think there's an appetite for that?
I know part of the answer to that question. So they do quick trials to understand demand for those types of projects. They put together a small $10 million program for the industrial sites program, and they got $230 million worth of applications. And they go, oh, okay, there's a lot of demand to participate in those kinds of projects. And then they went through and funded it at a significant level. So they came back and now they did a $10 million version of this mixed-use version. I do not know how to subscribe or how many applications went into that kind of program, but the way I understand it is, it's a smart way to figure out what kind of appetite and demand is there. So it's something that we can follow up on and see where it is, but I'm assuming they're testing the market and then they can come up with, because they're not going to move the needle with $10 million. So they're trying to understand what's there and then figure out how to fund it once they understand how much appetite.
Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, I'm Heather. I'm a recipient as well as a participator in a lot of the services that we're talking about. And my question is kind of a statement as well. How do combat that lost in between group? I am an individual who is a worker with disabilities, and because I made too much, my rent is now raised in housing. I am in housing, but my rent goes up, my food stamps go down to the point of maybe I can buy milk, maybe some bread, definitely not eggs. What about that bracket? Because I find myself, well, currently I am not employed because of medical issues, which is a whole nother area. But why is there nothing for that constant cycle? Because either I go backwards and get treated like a less than second-class citizen. When I got my job and I had medical care, the doctors treated me better. I went in with heart issues and chest pains and everything when I was a mental health patient and told that it was all in my head. I'm a female, you know, and that, oh, it's just an anxiety attack. You're fine. Sent home. I ended up having a heart attack. And not just once, but multiple times. I am a survivor of multiple resuscitations. You know, if I didn't have the doctor that I had after firing the one that just released me from the hospital after dying, mind you. But this is like, it's kind of all tied in, but there's a level that I was working, I was contributing, and then no longer am placed back in that setting of less than, and because of my address, I am not worthy of a doctor's care or a whatever, a professional's care, or to be looked at, and that constant cycle of, well then, they say, oh, you gotta get jobs, you gotta get off of the assistance, you gotta do this and that, but yet, what incentive is there? There is zero incentive. And is there anything out there that has that incentive for me to continue to work? Because I continue to work, I lose everything. My daughter continues to work and go to school full-time, work full-time so that she can help pay for the bills. But guess what? Because of that being full-time work for her, I lose my medical and my income. So where is this, like, what can we do for this gap, or is there a gap?
Thank you, thank you. There definitely is a gap, and I don't know if you guys remember when the preschool stopped in Sprint, and I fell in the gap between being able to get the free preschool from like United Neighborhood Centers or Boys and Girls Club and having to pay. And I ended up having to pay outright, and I was paying $650 a month. Plus, if she had to stay past 3 o'clock, it ended up being about $800 to $1,000 a month I was paying for childcare. And I fell in that middle gap, and I felt very, very frustrated with it. So I completely understand your statement. Go ahead, Rose.
Hello, how you guys doing? Thank you for this wonderful, wonderful experience. I'm learning so much, absolutely. And as I'm listening to everyone speak, and from your respective professions, I was wondering, when it comes to grants and funding, I'm an artist myself in the area. I'm a poet, I do poetry workshops, I work with youth, so I'm really into building the future for the people that's going to be filling the spaces that we're leaving, you know? So I wonder, with the Trump administration rolling back on so many average rights for people, how is that affecting the funding and the language needed to get that funding to the communities that need it the best? I'll ask all of you guys that question.
I come talk to you, Eric.
You'll have plenty of references.
This is the way it's going to work, and it's unfortunate when an administration has certain priorities. Those priorities get reflected in the funding opportunities, and the closer you align with those priorities, the better you score when you put in a grant application. So as you can imagine, if the funding priorities say A, B, and C, but your program is focusing on X, Y, and Z, you'll still get scored, but instead of getting a 5, you'll get a 1. And then when they tally all the scores, you'll fall in the lower tier and you won't receive funding. And so for a lot of nonprofits, a lot of organizations that receive federal funding, if you find that the priorities have shifted, you're really going to have to be able to start planning now. What alternative sources can we access, can we tap into? Because when those priorities do change, unfortunately, it does impact who gets the funding. Some organizations say, well, we have the flexibility to shift our priorities so that we can match up and get that funding. Other organizations don't have that flexibility, and they have to come up with and seek alternatives.
I think you answered that question very well. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Everett Upton. I'm from Common Ground Ministries. I have a couple of questions. Trying to keep it as close as I can. I think one of the things that when you shared about the carrot was critical, because a lot of times you have to see what motivation is to be able to attack it. But the problem I found with a lot of grants and things is it's like a Rubik's Cube. And you know, there's just so many components and things that you have to get to. And if you don't have full-time grant writers or staff that can do this, then how does a nonprofit, you know, if it's a growing nonprofit or a new one, it doesn't even have to be new. We have 20 years in, and for years, with the gentleman here, I forget your name, I worked with John Boer, and I was peer leadership coordinator, so we worked with a lot of young people that went through successful programs and got into trades and all of that. I guess, let me get back to the question so I don't talk too much. Whenever I finish a conversation, I always ask, is there a good question that I didn't ask? So, what do you have that you could offer us that we might not be aware of that would benefit us as a community? I know as a community, a lot of us have, our ancestors and family have been through some things over the years, and we've made it to this point. So even though we have the boogeyman making all these announcements and things that are kind of have a lot of us fearing right now, I think that we have to recognize that we're built for times like this, and don't be overwhelmed. all right? Because it's, there's certain things in place that will make things play out a certain way, and there's certain things that will be effective, and you should have concerns. But don't allow yourself to get too emotional, because I sometimes get like that. I'm just like overwhelmed, and that's part of the plan. So just stay focused, do what you do, and create our community so that we can do what we need to do. That is offered to us. We eat the meat, and like my grandmother and mother used to do,
Spit out the bone.
you don't spit the bone out, you save the bone for those hard days. And then you boil that bone, and then you put something in there that you can consume. What ages are available for the program? That was one of my questions. And the other is mainly, what can you offer us as a community in any sort of way that would help us sustain ourselves in some capacity right now? Because right now is the time that we're dealing with. Tomorrow is not promised. The past we've experienced, but we're interested in some things that might be able to benefit us right now, that we can touch and feel, that will be able to keep us until tomorrow and the next day. And then, what's that saying? Today's bread, we can't eat tomorrow's bread, today, or whatever that saying is. But anyway, that's my question to you.
In talking about the ages and things like that, our apprenticeship program, the only requirements of our apprenticeship program is that you have a high school diploma or a GED. Sometimes that's what, and we understand that. And, one of the other roadblocks that we find is transportation. Because our training centers are limited, so it's an hour and a half, 2 hours away from here. But if you're in the program, during your week of training, you are put up in a hotel right next to the training center at no cost to the apprentice.
Wow.
Again, that's paid for out of our training funds.
Okay.
So we have the opportunities, and it's not just getting the training, because I'll have my mom drive me down to the hotel and somebody can drive me over. Unfortunately, you got to drive to work. We're not Philadelphia, we're not New York City, where you jump on a bus or transit and get to a job site. So transportation is one of the big stumbling blocks that we deal with. Things to offer. Again, we are begging for apprentices. We have so much work coming up in this area. In the last 4 years, even through COVID, we have been pretty much at full employment, even through COVID. We had a month maybe of time that we had a couple hundred people that were out of work, but then a lot of the work that we were doing was considered essential, hospital work and things like that we do a lot of. So, it's so hard because we offer such a great thing, in my opinion. Family sustaining wages. I mean, a first-year apprentice right now is going to be starting out at over $20 an hour. For the first 2 years, they're going to get half of their annuity contributions and half of their pension contributions, which is going to be somewhere about $2.50 an hour for each of those two things. After the first 2 years, you're at full pension and full annuity. So, after 30 years or 40 years of being in this business, you can retire with dignity, with a pension plan, and with an annuity plan, and with health care. So we offer so much that we just can't seem to break through. Maybe it's the hard work. Maybe it's working when it's 0 out. Maybe it's working when it's 102 degrees out. I don't know what it is right now, because we're not getting the people interested in coming into the program. We will work with anybody to try to do anything to make sure that we get people from the areas. And again, we're begging, the diversity end of it. We have a Sisters in the Brotherhood program for females. We have a lot of females in our union. I talk about this all the time, and I just don't know what else to do. I talk to community, relationships and stuff like that, and the things that we have. We just can't reach the kids. Scranton High School actually has a alternative to college day, and I beg all the school districts in the area. You have college nights, the parents come. You have college days and things like that. We go to all these career days and things, and it's 30 minutes and the kids aren't in class. They get to walk around the gym and see what free stuff we brought. That's pretty much what it is. If we get 1 or 2 people at these career days that are actually interested in what we're doing, we're lucky. So Scranton High School actually has an alternative to college night. the trades are there, the utilities are there, you know, military is there, things like that. So, you know, I'd love to have a conversation with anybody here to see ways and find ways that we can help the communities, that we can help, you know, reach out and get to these people, because we have such a great opportunity to offer these people here.
Thank you so much. All right, we have time for one final question here. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, first I want to thank the panel because take questions in a cold call situation, outstanding.
Yeah.
And I know this isn't exactly what they do all the time. So I appreciate you putting yourself out there. Everyone putting yourself out there now.
Yeah.
Nobody gets the opportunity when you have someone that knows policy and works on policy at a higher level to ask certain policy questions. I don't think it's going to be answered easily. But with 1 out of 12 people facing eviction or losing their home due to health care, it seems we have a stream or a river of insecurity that is directly related to health care. It seems that we have nonprofit healthcare providers that in the end take homes. So if you have built through history your home and you have this in your family, if someone could put a lien where it makes it unaffordable for your children or for your relatives to maintain that home, it seems there's a direct link to that issue. And I don't know if there's a way in Pennsylvania that could be made where a nonprofit or a nursing home could not charge the full amount. It could be separated out into a percentage, maybe 10% of the home value, then you're on Medicaid, and they can get their services met through that. But what policies can we change in that so to stop the loss of family homes? It just seems like this is a stream that we can slow up and maybe help with the affordability and the rest of the issues that we have in housing.
You want to try to take that quickly?
I think the key to that is going to be advocacy, because a lot of that is controlled locally. So you have some health systems that won't do that. You have some health systems that, you know, after your bills weren't paid for so long, they send it to collections, which has an impact on your credit score, etc. And you have others that will not do that, and that is their policy. And a lot of that comes out of the advocacy in the community and really helping these large healthcare systems understand the impact that that will have. So I think advocacy is going to be key for that, because that's going to vary locally. Now, if you want to advocate at the state level so that states put some type of policy in place, then you have to do that kind of advocacy at the state level. And again, I think in working with the healthcare systems, when you show them the cost savings, that's when you really grab their attention. We just did a webinar on healthcare systems and homelessness, and we had Kaiser Permanente and some other healthcare systems on that webinar. We typically get maybe 500 registrants for our webinars. This had 3,500 because people were interested in how can healthcare systems help address affordable housing. And so I think getting that word out and really doing the advocacy is something that can bring that macro policy change.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. I'd like to give an extra to all of our panelists. Thank you so much. So right now, we will be having lunch that is provided right here by the University of Scranton. At noon, we're going to have a presentation. So if you guys want to make sure you use the restroom, get your food, and then come back in here, sit down and eat. After lunch, we will have some breakout sessions. So make sure you stay around for that. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you.
Yeah. Is this all of it? I do want to work with you directly. I'm the president of the Luzerne County NAACP. So, yes, I definitely want to talk to you directly. Yeah, and you're with the Black Woman.
Hi. Derek Rocky. I'm with Congressman President's office.
Oh, okay,
How are
cool,
you?
good. I've never met him before.
Okay. Okay.